Thank you for the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned at the end that you'd think as well of probably using or thinking about using SADRAM for AI. And when it comes to AI, I wouldn't dare say it's a new, but there is this vector databases that are kind of different from a key value type of logic, where we look for similarity between vectors rather than looking for keys. So have you thought of how could you use or could you adapt, or if SADRAM is usable in that context?
So what's the sort of elemental operation that you're doing all the time? You're comparing one vector to another vector?
So there is this similarity search between vectors. So you have in a context of AI, you're going to have, for example, a query asking about just a query, and then you take that one, you create an embedding, and then there's going to be a similarity search between that vector and whatever other vectors that you have in the database. So they look for example, the nearest neighbor that is similar to whatever vector you have as an input.
So what I pointed out earlier was that the SAMPU, though small, is a general purpose database. You can put your own programs on this. Like the algorithm that Spencer's working on right now is interested in doing row traversal and maintenance operations, so doing row splitting when the thing is full. You can put on whatever you want, right? Now, a modification like that would probably also require a different kind of custom logic rather than the comparison logic and the right shift logic that we currently are using in order to do a tree traversal. So, I mean, what would be great from my perspective is if that wasn't necessarily hardened logic, because we could certainly do some kind of like vector difference. So if all the vectors were sorted and you wanted to find the set of vectors that had the smallest difference between an input vector, yeah, sure, you could do that. But what you would have to do is, instead of tiling the DRAM row with comparators, you'd have to tile it with subtractors or adders, or I don't know. So different custom logic can help with that. SADRAM would be a prototype for something like that, but you'd have to have different logic embedded in the DRAM die.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is maybe a little bit higher level, but it strikes me that this technology potentially opens up a new set of hardware level vulnerabilities and things like row hammer and so on that we've seen in the past few years. Just wondering if you've given that much thought of what the attack surfaces might be.
Well, so my background is not really in crypto. I've spent a little time with row hammer. So, my knee jerk on row hammer is on the contrary, right? Like, sure, yeah, if you're keeping a row open and I think it's opening and closing the row over and over again.
Yeah, I think it probably naturally mitigates against row hammer specifically,
right?
But maybe opens up other things, like, because if you've got sort in here, then you've got the potential for leaking information through the time it takes to do an insertion, for example.
So I'll say, at least for the time that it takes the search, if you'll recall, the internal nodes are representing ranges. So it's different from B trees on the grounds that you can terminate the search early in B trees or binary search trees. But the time that it takes to go through SADRAM is always the same, because you're always going to the leaf nodes. Not that that's not actually, that dodges the question that you're proposing, because it's maybe a minor improvement if we don't have to always go to the internal nodes, but I don't know how to do that yet. As to the rest of your question, I'm thinking row hammer, it's not gonna, with the algorithm that the SAMPU is running, when it's doing a tree traversal, is not going to pay any attention to things that would mitigate it from row hammer. But if you have a different program in there, or maybe a more sophisticated program, in order to do a tree reversal and do an anti-rowhammer thing, then I mean I don't see why that couldn't be done, so long as there's enough program memory in order to store that program and enough and a performance degradation that you're willing to accept in order to check for rowhammer-like behavior from your accessor of DRAM.
Thank you, Jason. Question, you mentioned that you might want to work on a modified version of SQLite to see what performance difference.
Yeah, we need a benchmark. I was very light on any things that are actually impressive, because I mean we're still in the process of moving it to hardware we can actually have a reasonable index base.
Yeah, and so my question was, when I saw that, is will we need changes to potentially the Linux kernel or the operating system kernel to take advantage of this, or will we have to simply change the user space to see benefits?
Yes. So now that depends on how SADRAM is going to come into being. So for our first, as I said, for our first interface, for our first prototype, it's got to be based on PCIe. Like I don't know how to mix SADRAM with regular DRAM, and there's no way that the industry's not going to get rid of DRAM in favor of SADRAM. So we have to tolerate the two together, at least until we make zillions of dollars. So that being the case, we're probably talking about, so if it's a PCIe device, then yes, obviously you have to have a driver in order to go down to that PCI device, or I don't know, a CXL driver. I haven't done enough homework there yet. But some kind of driver that drives the data to basically a memory expansion board. And then, oh yeah, it sorts data too, great. So yes, there would have to be some modifications to the Linux kernel in order to take advantage of this.
I saw some smiles when Jason mentioned the word zillions of dollars. And it's, well, you cannot be an entrepreneur if you don't dream big. But when I've been walking conferences and trade shows mentioning this and that, someone says, do I need to change my software platform? And in the first couple of months when I was still a little bit not confident, the half second that I hesitated, the guy immediately said, then it won't work. Directly. But it was not a technical answer, it was just an operational one. So it's a hurdle to overcome. What do you have to comment? What's the hurdle to take us to the zillions?
And what's the question, sorry?
What's the hurdles that we need to overcome to have our accepted software platform in order to...
I mean, probably we would need to find a problem. So if we can manufacture SADRAM, at a price point that's not insane, right? Like we're dealing with an FPGA implementation right now, and the only way we can do a row buffer is with HBM. So we're nowhere near HBM. We're nowhere near a DRAM price point right now. So what we'd have to do is, locate a problem that is solvable with this kind of technology, and somebody takes a chance on us to get adopted. Does that answer the question?
Is that answer the question? Okay. Another comment then. Andrew.
Yeah, actually, my question or my comment was aligned to this. So yeah, thanks, Jason. I definitely want to. I'll connect with you here at some point this week. I got a lot. I think I can kind of speak into this, but just sake of time, I don't think we can go into a lot of the depth right now. But I think the line you're on, what you were just talking about, it's going to be key to start with the killer app. Like that's where you really need to start on this. Just even being as generic as database acceleration or sort, like that's not even enough to provide, I think, the focus and ultimately really target a solution. So we'll follow up, but that's kind of where I would start is, whether it's the KV cache or something else for AI, like it's going to take, identifying that killer app, and then everything else will
fall into place.
Kind of falls into place.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like a solution looking for a problem.
If I think about the broader class of processor and memory, right? I mean, that's been
Around
it's been
for a
looked
while.
at. It's been around a long time. We've looked at it hard. It's just for just a generic type offering, and for everything that has to kind of change here, or what you need to do for an accelerator, like you have to have the killer app for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree.
Excellent. So, should we move on? Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you.